Hello and welcome to Activating Magic. I'm Darla LeDoux, your host. I'm here with Amanda Kaufman. Hi, Amanda.
Hi, Darla.
You guys are going to love Amanda. We just met, we got connected through a mutual friend, and we started talking, and the synchronicities and commonalities we have are uncanny. So I'm excited. This is going to be a really fun conversation. Amanda is the techie one, and I'm the non-techie one, which we're going to argue is maybe more techie than we think. So we'll get into that. Amanda is the founder of the Coaches Plaza. She's generated over $2 million in revenue, primarily through co-created action coaching and courses. Her journey exemplifies the power of perseverance and authentic connection in the coaching and consulting world. With over 17 years of business consulting experience, she shifted her focus to transformative client relationships, overcoming personal challenges like social anxiety and body image issues. She rapidly built a successful entrepreneurial coaching company from a list of just 8 names. We got to talk about that in 9 months, quitting corporate and retiring her husband.
Yep, that's me.
That's so good and juicy. And I'm really excited. And I think, I want to hear your story, however you want to be known. And my curiosity is really piqued about this shift to transformative client relationships.
I love it. I love it. Well, I started out as what I call a water cooler coach now, which is somebody who does a lot of coaching at the office, by the water cooler. Hey, can I talk to you about this? And I started my professional career as a corporate consultant, which is usually focused more on the processes and the technology. And I evolved to being an organization design consultant, and I was focused on how do companies buy things. That's what I really was mostly focused on. But I kept getting distracted by every time we would go with these really big implementations into these large companies full of really smart people, we'd get these hiccups that were they seemed very small. They seemed like really small hiccups. Things like team members not completing their status reports on time, or people not following the directions to the glorious new process that the company had just purchased. So the reason I became a water cooler coach, I think, is because maybe it's where I grew up and, just wanting to make the most out of things. But I think it kind of just drove me crazy that people would spend so much time and money and energy on something to not do it. So it led me to having more conversations behind more of a closed door situation to find out like what's going on. It turned out that it had very little to do with executing the process or, filling in the presentation or anything like that. It usually had to do with their perception of the people dynamics or how they looked at themselves or all these things that didn't seem to have very much to do with the task at hand, but turned out to kind of be everything because one of the things I like to say is that your life isn't really your life so much as how you perceive it to be. So if you perceive that there's a bunch of enemies around you, or you perceive that you're too overwhelmed to get to everything, then guess what your reality is going to be like?
Yeah.
Right. So I ended up developing coaching capability really out of necessity, kind of a selfish curiosity, I guess you could say. But it turned out that I loved it so much more than just doing your standard spreadsheets and things like that that I'd been focused on to that point.
So something you said, I have so many questions, but one of the things you said that kind of gave a ping for me is where I grew up, I had to make the most out of things.
Oh,
What's that about?
so I'm from Inuvik, Northwest Territories in Canada. So that's above the Arctic Circle. It's a really remote town. And, I grew up wearing the hand-me-downs, and, there was one general store that people bought most things. To this day, it's really the only store I can think of where you can buy like a dress, a washing machine, a dozen eggs, like and a chainsaw, like
Uh-huh.
all in the same store.
That's amazing. I grew up in a town of 500. It sounds like though you have me beat. So
Well, it was like two
remote.
days to the nearest McDonald's, like we're talking it's small, but it's also really remote. So my comment about like wanting to make the most of things is,
Mm,
that's what we did. That's how I grew up. We wanted to every
wow.
article of clothing, and everything that we bought at the grocery store, use it all, because you don't know when you're going to get the next thing.
That's beautiful. Okay, so this kind of implementing processes and then
Mm.
people would resist it. I'm guessing you deal with that now.
Oh, still, it's so funny because one of the things we connected on was how we started out just coaching, right? And
Yeah.
we coached people, and that's not to marginalize it, but just the simple business model of, hey, friend, you have a thing you
Yeah.
want to accomplish. I have a great process. I have a great experience that'll help you reveal your limiting beliefs, identify your values, and find a way forward. So, like you, that's how I started. So I started with some career coaching. I was I really tapped into that rebel phase in a very big
Mhm.
way. And I was like, I don't want to have a niche. So I didn't. And I coached people on productivity. I coached people on
Mhm.
relationships. I even coached a guy who ran this actually like was so funny to me. He was a fitness dude and he had like multiple gyms, and I'm coaching him and I'm thinking, I'm like, he can see me, right? At the time I was still dealing with a lot of the body image stuff, but that's coaching, right? You don't
Yeah.
have to live the life of your client. You just have to take them through a process that allows them to transform. So that's what I did.
Yeah.
That's how I started.
Yeah, we happen to go to the same coaching school as a foundation, and definitely it gave me the confidence to know like if I can help someone shift their energy, everything will shift. And
Yes.
I don't have to have all their credentials. Not that I was always confident in that, right? Sometimes I was like, this person really wants to hire me. Like, I don't know if you ever
Exactly.
had
I
that.
think I think that a
Yeah.
healthy doubt about that is always a good thing because being grounded and humble, I think helps you in the longer run anyway. But to your point about process, what ended up happening is although I didn't have a niche per se, I very much had a process, and I'm a
Yeah.
very process oriented person. Like we both happen to hold chemical engineering degrees, which I just think is
Yes.
so awesome.
I know, right?
Right? So I'll processize everything from how we do laundry in the house to, of course, all the business things. Even if I'm, the rebel without a niche, I was getting all these clients coming in and they were paying me well, and I was experiencing flow in my business. And a lot of my coachy friends were like, "Yeah, but how are you doing that?"
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's how my evolution to the focus on the and what became the Coaches Plaza came about was I was like, well, actually there is a process, even if you don't have a
Yeah.
niche. And PS, that process gets a lot easier if you do have a niche, lesson learned. But yeah, so I started teaching what I knew and just expanded upon it. And that's why I'm deep into process now.
Okay, so one of the things you said when you were talking about your water cooler coaching is that a lot of times it was how they looked at themselves that
Oh my
was the
gosh.
problem. Can you talk
Yeah.
a little more about that and how that shows up for entrepreneurs?
Oh my gosh. Oh wow. I love talking about this because it's a little like Alice through the looking glass, You
Mhm.
think you're looking at how things are, but we don't realize just how much distortion and perception we layer on top of how we view the world and therefore ourselves.
Yes.
So we tend to do things like, and when I say we, I mean human condition stuff. We as human beings, we tend to assume that everything is going to keep going in the exact same momentum that it's been going. So we get very surprised when new things come along and kind of take us off that originally stated path. And the other thing we do is we tend to look at where we are today and set goals accordingly. So let's say your bank account
Mhm.
isn't where you want it to be. So then you're like, well, it would just be nice, like keyword there, just, it would just be nice if I could get, and then we say a really small number because we're thinking about our past experience, we're thinking about our current experience, And we don't realize just how much change is possible when we blow the lid off of those
Yeah.
assumptions.
We were talking about this on a retreat recently about being the person who,
Oh, yes. Yes.
and, that soul desire to be a person who maybe doesn't say the small number, but has a big number in their bank account or, whatever that expansive version is. And that's what's popping in my mind is the just like negates all of that, right?
Exactly. It's like we have to justify. We have to justify like how we're thinking. So we go, well, I just want, I hear with my clients all the time, I just want a coach. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
if that was true, you would probably go get a job just coaching,
Mhm.
or you would be happy
Yeah.
staying the water cooler coach. But
Mhm.
I think that that dissonance that we feel of, that longing or that comparison, I actually don't like calling it a comparison trap. I think comparison is really, really good because if you can see a greater vision for what's possible for you and you're feeling that heart tug towards the thing, go
Mhm.
for it. It's okay to not have the skills today, but it's remarkable how quickly you can develop the right skills to increase your capacity and therefore invite in those things that you're yearning
Mhm.
for.
Ooh, say more about that. It's remarkable how fast you can increase the capacity.
It's so true. I think capacity, we do it in multiple different levels. So the first thing is we have to have visual capacity, meaning like, can I even see this as a possibility? And the world's most successful people, like they have this capacity to see beyond, so far beyond what anybody else does. And by the way, they're not justifying it by checking in with their neighbor,
Yeah.
or checking in with their parents, or checking in with their friends. And, like, do you think it's possible? So I think that that's the first layer of
Mhm.
capacity is just the capacity to have greater clarity about what it is that you want. And then I think the second big piece of capacity is what is your skill set and what is your confidence level in the thing that you're wanting to become?
Mhm.
I think sometimes we look
Yeah.
at the things, the physical, tangible representation of the things that are on our current plane, and we think, okay, well, when I attain that thing, then it will mean XYZ about me. And we tell this big
Yeah.
story about that. And the truth is that those things you see, they're just signals. They're like milestones or like little lightning bugs flickering around that when you see them, you're drawn to them, you're attracted to them, but you're not trying to become them. They're just signals that you're on this path towards what you
Yeah.
ultimately would like to become.
So good. Is there a time in your journey since becoming an entrepreneur that a vision dropped in, came into your awareness that felt bigger than you could hold? And how did you handle that?
That's such a fantastic question. Absolutely.
Mhm.
And I'm getting goosebumps like on the top of my head because what I would say, knowing what I now know, is if you don't regularly have that feeling of like, oh man, this might be, more than I can handle, it's like, yeah. That's what the upward climb is actually like, is you keep hitting this new level on, this mountain climb. And when you're at the foothills, you see the summit and you're thinking, yeah, that's it. That's what I want to attain. That's what I want to become. But then what happens is you get there and you realize, oh, that's just a plateau. There's like a whole nother level available. And so what I tell my clients is may you never close the gap.
Mm.
We tend to feel so
Ooh.
scared, that, oh, there's such a gap between where I am
Yeah.
and where I would like to be. And I'm like, no, that's your vision.
Mm.
Like that drive we have as human beings to conquer, to like be at that next level, like that's a very beautiful thing. So yeah, I am regularly intimidated by my business and like multiple times a week. Yeah.
May you never close the gap. That's so good.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, and I mean, not to diminish the accomplishments along the way. I mean, I remember earning my first certification as a coach, and that was a big deal. I worked really hard to do that. And then my
Yeah.
next certification as a coach, that was a big deal. I worked really hard to do that too. And every revenue milestone. A few years ago, this was a big one. A
Mhm.
few years ago, I was chatting with my sister who had been literally not laid off, but she was laying down a lot, because she was working for a catering company when
Mm,
2020 hit. So
okay.
she was working in Canada, in Calgary, when that happened. And we were just talking one day about how the direction I'm going with my business, and that I'm going to be hiring people like this. And she mentions to me one day, she goes, "Yeah, I think I'd really like to develop enough skill to get paid six figures." And so then I get into big sister mode and I'm like, well, you could do that by becoming really good operationally, but you have to be really, really outstanding to win at that. You could get really good creatively, like maybe get into marketing or something like
Mhm.
that. And, that would probably take less time. And, sales is probably the fastest way
Yeah.
because nobody wants to do it, but they're willing to pay for it. And then she says to me, cool. So when do I start? And I was like, wait a second. I had to hang up on her and go speak with my business partner and husband. I'm like, should we make this like really a family business? Like really, really? Because it's hard
Mm,
enough being in business with your husband, and then to add my sister to the mix. I
yeah.
mean, she's been working for us for almost 4 years now. So
Wow.
yeah, but that one
Did
kind
you
of
make
swallowed
that
me up for a
decision
minute.
that day?
I did. And we made a pact. We
Nice.
were like sisters first, probation, and it's worked out really dreamily. But I have to say I was like really scared at the time. I'm like, this is one of the most important relationships in
Yeah.
my life. Like if this doesn't work out or if my business
Mhm.
falters or of course when you think something's going to go wrong, you start
Wow.
catastrophizing. So I definitely did that. But I ultimately just
Wow.
took a big deep breath and I said, if she's going in eyes wide open, I'm doing the
That's
same thing,
amazing. That's
and we've
amazing.
we've worked together ever since.
Well, and to be able to have those honest conversations about it versus just coming in as like a big sister gonna help or rescue, it sounds like you like set the foundation
Yeah,
for
exactly. I
success.
mean, well, that was it. And it's not that it's been like, and then we turned around and we made, incrementally more and more and more every single month. Nope, learning curve. She's been in a few different
Yeah.
roles. Like we've had to make adjustments.
Mm,
But yeah, very valuable member of our team.
that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Okay. So, magic and math. First of all, let's talk about your magic. So, there is the systems and process part of you. There's the part of you that I would call resourceful. Like you're looking at, ooh, what can we do with this?
Hmm.
Um, there's there one of the magics is called expansion magic. I definitely hear that in you, like being able to go roll out a project and go, okay, but I want to get every ounce of value out of this by making sure everybody's on board and like really all in. So I hear some expansion in that. When you're working with your clients, Amanda, and there's stuff not being said, maybe, or something they don't see, something hidden from their view, how do you receive that information?
How do I receive that? Goodness. I call my coaching co-created action coaching. I am very action oriented.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I think
Is it co-created for you? Is it you and the client, or is it the client and source?
well, I intended it as we together create
Mhm.
this experience together, right? So
Uh-huh.
source can certainly come into that. And I think the idea is that in a coaching client relationship, it's going to be far greater than the sum of the parts. So yes,
Mhm.
absolutely source. And I would say also, perspective and experience. So
Mhm.
when I started as a coach, I didn't have as much entrepreneurial experience in the first year, 6 months. So the perspective that was coming into the coaching calls at that time was really more based on, okay, what does the client have to work
Yeah.
with? What do I have to work with? And kind of throwing it in the middle. And even now, I'm working on year number
Mhm.
8. When I'm coaching somebody, I have the value of all of those past experiences and the past experiences of working with past clients that kind of come through as well.
Mhm.
So, that being said, I think experientially, I do follow quite a bit of intuition. I like
Mhm.
having a topic to anchor our sessions to. And I always ask my clients, so when you were preparing for this session, what were you really hoping that we were going to work on today?
Yes. Mhm.
Right? So I love to invite that and bring that in. And some days people are like, coach me, coach, right? Like they're kind of sitting back. But other times they're like, I know we were going to talk about focus today, and here's what's going on in my life, and I'd really like to work on that, right?
Yes.
And so I really believe in flexibility in the relationship.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And if they've got something coming, I totally always appreciate that myself as a client too. Something coming up in life, to me, that's sourced. It's like, oh, it just happens that this is coming up while I have a call with
Exactly.
Amanda. And that's, really going to be transformational. The view that they have, or maybe how they're looking at themselves, is often different than maybe the view that you get to see because you don't have all those beliefs and baggage and all of that.
Hmm.
And, some of the people I work with, they get a ping of recognition. Like it's like a light bulb of like the client says something and it's like, oh, yeah, that's a lie. Or they feel it in their body, or source gives them a word. Or how does it occur for you?
What I've noticed is that often before we really begin our journey on personal growth and development, we are not very good at seeing ourselves. We
Yes.
often borrow everybody else's lens
Mm.
to validate and verify what they're seeing of us.
Yes.
So one of the things that I love to work through with my clients in a much deeper way is what are your core
Yeah.
values that are yours? Because one of the things we learned when we did our certification was this idea of fear-based values
Mm.
versus those that are coming through authentically and consciously. And that discovery is pretty powerful because sometimes our workplace kind of helps us prioritize certain aspects of who we are, but it ends up being distorted because that's not really like our most favorite thing that we want to focus on and emphasize. And
Mhm.
same thing with family. I've had a lot of people come through who are like, I'm thinking about building a business, but everyone in my family says that this is a bad idea. And it's like, okay, cool, but you're thinking about it. What's making it come up for you? And sometimes for people it can be very spiritual. Sometimes it's actually super pragmatic. Like tying into the math idea. I've had plenty of people say, you know what? I just realized that my salary is only going to go up by 0.5% per year, and I have almost no
Yeah.
control over that. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay. All right. So what do you think needs to happen? Well, I think I want to start a business, but I've got to learn how to sell. I've got to learn how to market. I don't even know what to sell. Like, should I get into this or that or the other thing? And I think the way it really comes through is through questions and just
Mhm.
questioning everything.
Yeah. I'm thinking of for me, it was my stepdad passed away and I was in my cubicle because my boss said, I really need you to show your face at work. And I wasn't there
Mm.
by his side. And so it was in that regard, it was very pragmatic of like, I just want to be able to be physically where I want to be.
Oh, that's so good. I'm sorry about your father. Um,
Thanks.
And those moments, right, really show us
Yeah.
who we really are and what's really important to us. I
Yeah.
think sometimes, especially in the coaching space, we can get a little we can get a little enlightenment shamey. And like what that means to me is like we think we have to walk around with all of this perfectionism and
Mm.
always be happy and like never upset, never
Yes.
sad, silver lining on everything. And the thing is these incongruencies, those moments
Mhm.
really show us who we are because if we didn't
Yeah.
experience that, we wouldn't be able to ask the question and say like, well, wait, what's
Yes.
really important here?
Yeah. The contrast is the transformation, really. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And even just like the emotional overtone, in general, like for example, if somebody experiences quite a bit of anxiety or quite a bit of depression, I'm not an ist of any kind, not a therapist or
Mhm.
psychologist or psychiatrist. And that experience can really show you that you want to make changes to make it so that that
Yes.
experience is less prevalent.
Yes. Creating this container with your clients, it's co-created, and then your intuition shows up a lot. How do you how do you work with someone who's really magical? They say, I just want to coach,
Yeah.
and or I just want to, do sessions, or I just want to heal. I love that you said, well, that's not true, or you wouldn't be doing this like this. Um, but how do you help someone like that embrace systems and math?
This could be a little controversial, but one of my favorite moves is the takeaway.
Mm.
So the truth is, I don't actually
Mhm.
have power over whether you run a business, don't run a business, do your marketing, don't do your marketing, set up a system, don't set up a system. But what I certainly can do is I can say, okay, well, if you're really happy with what you're doing, then great, and pull back. And it's really
Yeah.
interesting because it again kind of creates that contrast, especially in our space. I think there's a lot of people who see coaches that struggle and with marketing, with sales, and they just try to push their way
Yeah.
on the coach. And it has the opposite intended effect. What ends up happening is the coach ends up shutting down. They don't want to be visible on social media. They don't want to respond to any
Mm.
messages. And they also don't want to send any messages or, be like
Mm.
that. And so what I find works better is this takeaway idea where it's like, then don't, right? That's
Yeah.
okay. And then they're like, no, that's not okay. Usually they'll be say, that's not okay. That's not what I want. I asked you to help me. And I'm like, okay, how would you like me to help you? How do you see this turning out? And so I actually have a whole framework around this where if you imagine like a triangle, at the very top, a very small percentage of your clients are going to come in and they're going to have like rockets strapped to their shoes. No matter what you throw at them, they're going to win because they're just in this mindset. And, from an energy coaching standpoint, we would have said they're like highly anabolic, like somebody who's just
Yes.
like, they'll take anything and turn it into gold. And then there's the people that say, well, I'll do whatever you say.
Mhm.
Right. And so for that reason, as a coach, I've made the choice that I also am a trainer and I offer curriculum because a lot of people will model before they're comfortable making something new. And there's
Mhm.
nothing wrong with that. That's
Mm.
exactly how people learn, and that's
Yeah.
cool, right? The
Yes.
next layer down are the people who say, well, I'll do it if I have time. And those people are priority confused,
Mhm.
right? They're kind of like, okay, well, I'm in, but I'm out,
Mhm.
right? But I'm mostly in. And then you've got the people who are like, I'll get to it someday. I'll get to it sometime. And they're just kind of expecting universe to do all the work,
Yeah.
and they will eventually discover that either they don't want that work or that universe needs you to collaborate,
Yes.
right? And then I love the last layer, and they are the I'm not gonna do it, and there's nothing you can do to make me, right? And like these people are kind of amazing because they will they will go to the ends of the earth with suffering, but it has to be on their terms. Ask me how I know what this person is like, right? Like I get it. And what's so cool is if you're patient with this person, if you can hold space with this person, if you can ask them, so what is working
Mhm.
well for you? You know, what
Yeah.
can happen is they get sick of their results. And one day they say, maybe I'll just try yours. And lo and behold, they do it and they get a different kind of a result because they stop putting all
Mhm.
their energy into resistance,
Yes.
you know? And those people are amazing because like once they start getting the results, they become absolute advocates for your brand, for working
Because
with
they're
other people,
stubborn,
helping other
right?
people. Yeah, well, they're like, I got the breakthrough. And it's like, yes, of course you did, because you did the work. That's amazing.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
So how do you help your clients? I'm feeling like you probably help them work with these different types of people. Is that a part of your curriculum?
Yeah, I love teaching how to be awesome as a coach. I don't have a certification at this time. I've flirted with the idea of doing it, but I haven't yet done that.
Uh-huh.
But I do a lot around the marketing and sales, and just as a core tenet, I believe if what you think you're doing is just that amazing and a bag of chips, that you're willing to be misunderstood, then you're going to be so amazing at selling and marketing your stuff because you're going to be screaming it from the
Mm.
rooftops practically, and there's nobody that's going to stop you. And I would say that, a person like that who has strong conviction behind the process that they do and how they facilitate it is going to outperform someone who's studied the best copywriting books and taken all of the marketing programs, because
Mhm.
their belief in themselves and other people
Mhm.
is so strong that, the likelihood of stuttering or showing up on camera without makeup on, or all those things that you're not supposed to do, don't get in the way because people can just feel
Yes.
your energy.
Yes. We were just talking about this today. It's like advice I would give my first, my early business self would be just to get in front of people and, with a couple bullet points and just do it and do it badly, but in aligned energy, you
Yes,
know? Because I used
totally.
to network and I would stand up and I would say whatever I would say and I would sit down and I would have the chatter in my head and people would come up to me and say, I have no idea what you do, but I think I need you. And I'm like, okay. Because
Fair
my
enough.
energy was there, even though I don't know what the words were. They didn't know what the words were. It didn't really matter.
Exactly, exactly. There's something to be said for enthusiasm. I think it makes up for a lot when it comes to the skills. And the thing is, I think Winston Churchill said that the definition of success is running from failure to failure without lack of enthusiasm,
Mm,
right? If you can just enthusiastically
yes,
fail, just like
yes,
give yourself that permission to do your best based on what you know. And here's the other side of that is, like, when you have the genuine enthusiasm, you can also look back and say, okay, this is where I did not feel prepared. This is where I would
yes.
love some insight from an
Mhm.
expert, or to read a book or listen to the podcast or what have you. And most people are so
Yes.
crippled by the fear of even doing the thing, they don't do it, much less do the reflective part.
Yes. Yes. And or try to study everything so you're prepared for anything rather than do it and then know, oh, that's the thing I need work on.
Yeah, I mean, I love learning things from kind of esoteric places, and studying things that don't have much to do with the core thing.
Mm.
And I will often get inspiration from that, but I'm very mindful that, there are goals here. There are things that
Yeah.
we are feeling a strong pull towards doing.
Mhm.
So being really careful about procrasta work, work that's
Yes,
disguised is important. Yeah.
totally. You said there are goals here. What do you think most coaches miss in terms of putting a system in place to actually hit a goal? What are some of the mistakes you see?
Well, first off, they're so attached to being right where they are that they can't let go of that idea enough to boldly go into strange new places. Right?
Mm.
This white knuckle grip on the current state, I think, is one of the biggest things. I think the second thing is they tend to develop stories about that actually justify why they stay where they are, or that they're going slower than they could, or that, you
Mm.
know and I know I did that. I mentioned at the beginning that I started my business off of 8 names on a post-it.
Yeah.
Well, the other side of that was I had like 400 LinkedIn connections that I specifically wasn't reaching out to, because the story in my head was that it would go back to work, work would get mad, work would fire me, I wouldn't be able to provide
Mhm.
for my family, we'd wind up under a bridge in Duluth. right? So it's challenging to go for your goals when you're basically on such a restrictive diet. You know,
Yeah.
you're like, I can only talk to these 8 people, and then you build this huge story about why, and it's like,
Oh.
that just wasn't true. If I had messaged all 400 of those connections, I probably would have achieved my goals in a quarter of the time, right?
I love that you have a LinkedIn thing too, because maybe it's the engineer. Like I resisted putting coach on my LinkedIn profile for so long. I was
Oh
trying to
yeah,
get
I wear it
everything out of
everywhere.
there.
Yeah, I'm like, give me a coach t-shirt because I've got it on my Facebook, my Instagram, my LinkedIn. But yeah, that hesitancy to embrace who we're becoming.
Yes. Because I thought, just in case this doesn't work out, I want a resume that I can go back to engineering.
Wow, yeah, gosh.
It didn't take too long. And once I updated it, I got 3 clients from other places, but it was like the energy that I was holding of like, oh, you know, still believing that it was a dumb thing to do to become a coach, right?
Yeah, and you know what? I faced the same thing. I was like, what if this doesn't work out? I was doing so well in corporate. What if I want to go back? And there's a certain amount of wisdom in the story of burning the boats. I'm actually not a
Mhm.
huge fan of that. I think that
Mm,
you should be financially pragmatic as you're building your business as much as you possibly
mm,
can. But I think the other thing that we forget is that every time we sit down to write a resume, we get to decide what to include and emphasize.
mm.
So even if you had decided to go back to chemical engineering because you just decided that that was what you wanted to do, you can sum up your entrepreneurial career as a coach in one sentence if you want to, or even
Right.
omit it, you know?
Right.
And I think sometimes that's another example of just kind of keeping our feet kind of rooted
Yeah.
firmly in the mud because we're scared of what the uncertain future might bring.
Mhm.
Hmm.
So systems wise, so I heard the attached to being right. I really resonate with that one. There, I had a lot of that. Like, but yeah, you don't understand me. And like if I just had given that up and just did it, just do something, I would have moved faster. Not that I spent that much time not moving because I had to make money. So there wasn't really a choice. But then when you hear yourself developing stories that justify why you're moving slower,
Yes.
that's really good, right? Like all of the energy it takes to make up the stories could be spent making sales or something.
It's so true. I had a shower earlier today and I was thinking in the shower, I'm like, I looked it up. For the size of business that I have, I'm in the top 1.7% of female entrepreneurs.
Hmm.
And like I didn't really love hearing that, to be honest with
Yeah.
you, because I'm not at $1 million a year. I've done multiple
Right.
millions, but I haven't done it, in one
Yeah.
year. And I was like, really? And I looked deeper, 80% of businesses, female-led businesses, don't make more than 100,000 a
Mm.
year. And
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, by the time you take into account the expenses of running the business, the profit and the
Yeah.
taxes and all of that, that really does not leave you with very much,
No.
right? And I was thinking about like, well, why is that? Why is it that we have
Mhm.
more like ladies getting into entrepreneurship than ever, but we're
Yeah.
encountering the ceiling? And I was thinking, in a lot of containers that I was in as an entrepreneur, especially the women led ones, we spent a lot of time talking about our justification and our
Mm.
rationalization and our feelings.
Mm.
And what I did very intentionally a few years ago is I started going into bro masterminds. And
Mhm.
can I just tell you, that was so unfreaking comfortable, like really uncomfortable
Mhm.
to do that. And I'm so grateful I did because it gave me the contrast, in those environments, we're not talking about burnout. We're not talking about setting, you know, setting up our work according to our monthly cycle and then saying, well, guys
Mhm.
have it easier because they have a daily cycle. And I'm like, okay, hang on. Your
Mhm.
customer doesn't care where you are in your cycle,
Mhm.
right? But I think there's just so many off ramps and opportunities that we have as female entrepreneurs to
Mm.
reinforce this story that we can't do it,
Mm.
you know? And I've
Yeah.
got 4 kids, so I certainly have had a lot of people look at me kind of cross-eyed, like, so does that mean you don't love your kids? Does that mean that you don't have enough time for your business to do a really good job? And there's all these assumptions that can kind of come with it. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, the fewer excuses I allowed myself to make, the more I did in business and continue to do in
Mhm.
business. And so
Yeah.
it's something to be very, very mindful of is like these coaching conversations, they're not just therapeutic, they don't just feel good. It's literally taking the lens or the perspective you're being handed and you don't even realize and seeing how is that limiting your potential.
Yeah. It's interesting. I came up in masculine masterminds, not necessarily like the full on bro, but very action, do, do, do.
Right?
And
Yes.
so I had the opposite of like, wait, you mean I can feel my feelings while I do this? And I can like, be emotionally clear to take the action. And so a little bit of the opposite path. But I'm definitely going to be percolating on this idea of more off ramps that possibly are available, right? Or reasons we could give ourselves
Yeah,
to.
and that are socially acceptable is really what I kind of arrived at. I think, guys have it kind of
Mm,
tough too because they're constantly being pushed into this like be the savage hunter protector role. And if you're a sensitive guy,
yeah.
like that's not going to work really well for you, you know? So I think that we have challenges either way. But I think one of the things that I've really appreciated on the come up is getting to hear different sides and different ways of looking at it and
Mm,
getting increased awareness around like where am I saying that I'm tired and really I'm actually really very uncomfortable and there's decisions that are
mm,
outstanding to be made that if I simply made those decisions I
yeah.
would suddenly have a big burst of energy. So I think the
Yes.
answer, there isn't the answer, but I think an answer that would work for most people, male, female, whatever, is probably somewhere where you get to experience your intuition, but also have some spreadsheets.
Mm. Yeah. Talk about the spreadsheets.
Yeah.
What's the top spreadsheets that every coach earning 50K or more needs to have?
Oh, very simple. You need to know your cost of client acquisition.
Mm.
And if you're like, it's free, I'm like, baby, look at the number of hours you put into
Uh-huh.
it. So make sure you're taking
Yeah.
into account your labor costs, not just your advertising costs. So,
Mm.
what does it cost you to acquire a client? And then when a client signs up with you, what is your average order value? So meaning like how much are people paying you on the first purchase? And
Mhm.
then what's the lifetime value of that person?
Yeah.
And using those metrics to feed off of each other so that you're growing in a controlled kind of a manner. I think a temptation when you start making good money, you're over 50,000, you're like, I have all the money, right? Not true, because you're gonna have all the people coming and saying, you know what would help you go faster? And it only costs XYZ. And before you know it, you're spending $55,000 to
Yeah.
maintain a $50,000 business. So I think the main spreadsheet would be the P&L. Um,
Mhm.
if I was to give like a bonus, oh my gosh, when I figured this one
Oh,
out, my life changed.
yeah.
It would be sales velocity.
Mm.
So they talk about this in e-commerce, but we never talk about it in coaching, I don't think, and
Mhm.
consulting. But how many days pass between when the stranger meets you and
Mhm.
they become a client on average? That was such a great metric for me to figure out because then I realized that some of the activities that I was doing day in and day out weren't necessarily helping to speed up that
Yeah,
velocity. If you can get that velocity a little faster, then what that means is that you get cash coming back and paying for the expense sooner.
I love that.
Yeah.
So, in e-commerce, I know there's lots of guidelines and, this type of product and this is the average. Do you feel like what a good goal would be for that sales velocity in the coaching world?
In the coaching world, yeah, I think like if your time from when a new follower becomes a new follower is Ideally, you want to get that new follower to enroll and subscribe in your email list or something a little bit more serious with you pretty much as soon as possible. Like if you can do that within the first, days or even hours, that would be awesome. So that's why having your
Yeah.
profile optimized is a really good move.
Mhm.
Once they become the lead, right? It's not uncommon for somebody to be on your list or get to know you for 45 days, 90 days, 120 days before they make a higher ticket purchase or even any purchase at all. That can happen, you know? And one of the things that I see a lot is coaches will be like, okay, well, I want to have clients in January, so I'm going to start doing the work in December. I'm like,
Mhm.
no, you want clients in January. You need to start doing the meeting people and talking to
Mhm.
people part and open for business and sales in
Now.
September. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Because some people are going to come in, they're going to meet you, they're going to think you're fabulous, and within
Yeah.
14 days, you're their coach. But most people, it's going to be that 90-day kind of timeline of seeing
Yeah.
that you're consistent, that you're not full of baloney, that they agree with your point of view on things, and then
Yeah.
and then they'll be open to talking to you.
Yeah. I always say it depends on how you want to work, right? If you want to like go physically in person and sit next to people and get to know them and have the conversation, like, yeah, you could start in December and fill in January, although Christmas might not be the best. But if you want to have your systems do the work for you and warm people up and, give them things to engage with, you need a runway.
You do. And, I did a lot of networking actually at first because I was really nervous about online systems.
Yeah.
And what happens in in-person networking that's pretty much the same as online is eventually you've kind of met everybody in your community. And then you see each other again that next month and again the next month and
Yeah.
again the next month. And the thing is if they never really viewed you as a viable option for being their coach, they're not going to likely change their mind
Yeah.
unless something significant happens. So what happened for me is I was networking for
Yeah.
a good amount of time and I had great success in the very beginning, but then it like dropped off and I couldn't figure out why. And it turns out
Mhm.
like every kind of marketing you do, the first time you hit it, you're going to get this low
Yeah.
hanging fruit off the tree and you're going to be like, I'm amazing at marketing, I'm amazing at sales, and everybody loves me. But then, as you keep running the same process, you're going to have to reach higher and higher for the same fruit unless you keep planting,
Mm.
right? And so, one way to keep planting if you're in person is make sure that you're shaking up what networking events
Yes.
that you're going to and adding to your repertoire and cycling things in and cycling things out. It's the same thing with social media.
Yes.
You can use seasonality to change the conversation, but if you just like every day you're posting the same thing over and over and over for months, people will be like,
Yes.
I saw that show. There's no novelty.
So true. Yeah, I really did go to different events regular. I think I was unconsciously competent at doing that. I was like watching
Yeah,
that they all know each other and they're, talking about the same things. And I'm like, I don't want to be in that conversation. But let me come and like meet the people who are my clients and then go somewhere else. Yeah, that's really
exactly.
great.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so you have a free gift for people from analysis to action. Can you tell us about that?
1,000%. I love this system. It's called the LEAP system. So let's earn a profit. So, as coaches, obviously our first mission is to coach. And thing is, if coach doesn't get paid, right, or
Yeah.
see an economic benefit to continuing to do it, then often other things are going to have to crowd out the coaching. We have to do something to pay the rent and
Yeah.
to grow. So the LEAP system is my 6-step system where that I use with all my clients, whatever stage they're at, even if they're established as a coach, to build a business that's going to be viable and is going to basically self-reinforce itself and scale well.
I love it. I'm going to put the link below this episode and in the show notes. Um, when I think about, I'm sorry, I got distracted because I was going to get it. And I was like, okay, wait, I'm gonna go get the gift. One of the things I think about with this podcast, so it's called Activating Magic, which
Hmm.
is really, for me, magic is trusting yourself. It's trusting your knowing, trusting that, your inner knowing is guided by source and you can walk your own path. I like to ask this question. I imagine through the sound waves hitting people's ears in, like small towns like I grew up in, or maybe where you grew up, or places where people are like the odd one out in their family or their community or their job. Like they just see the world differently. They're picking up things other people aren't. They're wondering if they're a little bit crazy. What message would you have for that person who hasn't yet stepped into who they are?
This is such a great question. I would say you are probably crazy. If crazy is thinking differently than everybody else, just accept that.
Mm,
I think one of the things that makes us even crazier when we already think differently is this notion that we need to put all this energy into helping everybody else think like us.
mm,
And I think that one of the most valuable things I ever did was give myself permission to move, to get education, to go enroll in certification programs, to do the networking. It was so uncomfortable because all I want to do is, stay on my social media or, stay hidden behind that computer screen.
mm,
And we wouldn't be talking right now if we hadn't had a mutual friend that, I actually met at a networking event years and years and years ago.
mm,
And we stayed in touch, and that's how you and I ended up connecting. And, I think are again hanging on to this certainty or thinking like, I have to know how the story plays
mm,
out. I think it's tempting when you look at your friends or family that seem to be okay with kind of walking the playbook, thinking like, maybe I'm supposed to want that. Maybe I'm supposed to
mm,
want to be like that. And I would say, no, you're not. You're not supposed to. And you know
mm,
what? You can let them run their playbook and you'd be so surprised how many people come later down the path and say, I always really admired how you walked your own path and I think I'm ready to do the same
mm.
thing. I've found a lot of people really don't want to run the playbook. It's just that that's what we know to do.
Yeah, that's so good. I bet a lot of people listening are thinking, I've had that thought. Like, I should want that, what everybody else seems to
Yeah.
want.
1,000%. And don't sell yourself short, like sometimes when we I for sure did this. I was like, okay, well, the average coach, I do like math. The average coach makes XYZ dollars. And so I was willing to slash my lifestyle income down by less than
Same,
half. You did
same.
the same thing, yeah. And I was like justifying it because I said, well, I don't want to run the playbook, and if this is the cost, I'm willing to pay it. I think it's good to be willing to pay the price of
Yeah.
being weird. That's good.
Yes.
But where it can really throw you off is forgetting another piece of math, which is the bell curve, right? You do not have to settle for average at any point in your journey
Mm.
on any factor. You can go for the top of the bell curve and you are capable of developing skills and building relationships and developing yourself. Like you're super capable of doing all of that. Aim high, man. You're going to have lots of problems in life. Make them awesome.
Yeah. On that note, I think we close. That's so good. I love the way your brain works, Amanda. This has been so fun. I know there's so many juicy nuggets, and I can't wait to share.
Thank you so much for having me. I had an absolute blast.
Yes, same. All right, everyone. This is Darla LeDoux for Activating Magic, and we'll see you in the next episode.